Hello, and welcome to episode 7 of Rising Above Trauma, Addiction, and Culture in a Crazy World. I'm Michael.
And I'm Jim.
And I'm
I'm
Mike.
very, yeah, I was about to say, I'm very excited because first of all, this is our final episode of season 1. But I'm even more excited because we have a guest. So, do you want to, Jim? Do you want to introduce our guest, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, everybody. Today I'm proud to present my brother Mark, and he was directly involved in the trauma we experienced growing up. So we want to ask him some questions and get some insights from him. Mark, welcome to the podcast.
All right. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Um, So, can you briefly introduce yourself, just for starters?
Okay. My name's Mark. I'm Jimmy's brother. Um, I'm 68 years old. I grew up in Southern California. I'm older than Jimmy by 5 years. So I kind of went through some of the trauma. He kind of witnessed the things that happened to me. And right now, I'm retired in Hawaii.
All right, fantastic. You're a pretty smart guy. Kelly, our sister, retired in super hot, super cold Texas, so you must be some sort of a genius.
Uh, well, Kelly uh, wanted to live with their horse, and to be able to afford the property for a horse, she had to move to Texas.
Yeah, God bless our sister, because she was part of our experience growing up, which was, as my book says, both awesome and terrible. So let's get into the main questions here. Um, you bought my book, and thank you also for sending one to Kelly, and I think you sent one to your daughter, right?
Yes,
Okay.
to your niece, Kim.
Yes, and you also read the book, and I do appreciate it's always great to have, somebody read the book. So I want to get your reaction to uh, uh, the book I wrote about our growing up time, and just see if there's anything you remember differently that comes up, and if you can think of something off the top of your head, which part was remembered differently.
Well, one part I remember differently is the driving scene where we were going to the Olympics and you were driving the car, I guess, and kind of went off into the dirt. You weren't old enough to drive yet, and our other driver, him and I were driving, uh, was sitting next to you, I guess, and you drove off into we were driving like a Ford F-150 with a camper on it. And I was sitting up on the top looking out and I could see us go over into the dirt. Anyway, I thought that I was the guy sitting in the passenger seat and that David, your friend, was the one sitting in the driver's seat, and he was the one that drove it off into the dirt, and that I was responsible because I was in the front seat. But you told me that no, 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 you were up at top, and I was with the other guy, Jay, and I'm the one who drove it on things. So there's something that you remember differently than I do. And I like your memory better because I always felt bad about I thought it was David drive that car where we almost went into a big accident. It's like driving 65 miles an hour down the freeway and you get your left wheel off into the dirt. And it's like if you turn it too quick, man, the car's gonna flip. It's a camper. So anyway, that's
All right.
something I remember different.
Okay, so that's pretty clear. And Michael, do you want to make a comment on that? Because you know a little bit more about this issue with writing memoir and memory.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I was just listening because it's fascinating to me that here you have the same experience that you each remember differently. Now we're talking what, 50 years ago now, right? We're talking half a century. Um, and but it's just, yeah, it's fascinating to me how, and it really illustrates how memory is very much individual. And I remember my own experience, like wanting other, this is one of the ways that I'm kind of jealous of you guys, because you got each other to like corroborate your memories. So I was an
Right.
only child, so I had
Right.
nobody to tell me, no, that happened, that didn't happen. So like I love this, that you guys have each other for that.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Our
All
stories
right. Well,
are
I'm gonna. But Mark, you missed one of those questions. I'm gonna back up a little bit, okay? And the question is, when you first read the book, what were some of your reactions to various parts? Because some of that book is fictionalized. I call it creative nonfiction. And maybe you could just give us me a couple reactions to, what you read in the book, or the book itself, whatever your thoughts are on that.
um my thoughts are I enjoyed it because it brought back memories. And I like the way that you wrote, like short little stories. And then that story was over, and then it goes to the next story. And I do remember those stories. I don't remember. I wasn't there to see exactly what happened. Like, I don't know if you told the story yet about uh, the being against the sliding glass door.
Yeah, that's one of the stories that is pretty much directly what happened. That I didn't do much creative nonfiction on that. And the strange thing about actually liking it in some way, some strange way, because at least it was predictable as a result of my disrespect. Dad was sober, and that was a strange reaction. But I came close to being pushed through the sliding glass door. So when
Right.
you so that what about the part where Mark Hayes is or Mark Parker, oops, is running up the hill?
When he's running up the hill.
Yeah, that part is was that close at all? Because I did my best on that
Yeah,
one.
yeah, that was. I can't tell you. That was a story of uh, probably being around 16 years old. My dad's probably telling me he's mad at me and he's telling me something, and I talk back or something, which is a total no-no. And he starts, and I'm ready to run, which is a total no-no. And I run out the front door. He chases me out. I don't remember exactly why he got mad at me, but he chased me out the front door and he almost had me because he was in good shape. He was probably, and he wasn't that old. Shoot, he was like 38. And luckily, I hooked a tree with my arm, our front in the front yard, right? And then it swung me, and he missed just grabbing me, man. He would have killed me. And I ran up the street yelling, "Help! Help! He's a maniac! He's a maniac!" And then he heard that, and he's a doctor in town. He kind of backed off, and I ran up to my neighbor's house, but he did chase me up there pretty good. Okay, so that's one thing that happened.
Well,
And,
good. I got that one pretty accurate, right? So that one I think I have. I just added a little bit of a sense of, and to create the aura of the contrast between his reputation and his good looks and youth. I had the neighbors imagining, and I did say imagining because I don't know what the neighbors are thinking, but these women attracted to him, thinking, "Oh, it's probably nothing," and more interested in the attractiveness of him than the poor kid getting
right.
terrorized, And that was just a sense that I had of nobody stepped in and helped us. Nobody was, helping. There was
No.
no help.
Yeah. Do you think that, like, in some ways, though, that was the time? Because, like, I think about that too. Like with my experience. Now, you guys grew up in the '70s. I grew up in the '80s. like Child Protective Services wasn't what it is today, and like I think a lot of things that, you know, parents would get their kids taken away from today when they were able to do back then.
No,
Um,
Michael, I did research on that for the book a little bit, and it didn't exist at that time. Not yet.
okay,
Yeah.
that's
And I
interesting.
think it
Yeah.
was the culture also was none of my business. You know, every family raises their kid the way they're supposed to. What are you butting in? So there was a bit like that. Mark, what do you think?
Yes,
Do you ever feel like, why the heck didn't anybody step in? You know, like for the abuse stuff?
okay, how about this one? Um, I don't think you told this in your book, but here's a true story. As far I bet these, thanks to your little podcast, I realize this not might not be exactly true because maybe we get things wrong sometimes. But we're having Christmas dinner, Michael, and my grandmother was visiting. And we were sitting at the dining, we were in the dining room at the dining room table, and we were singing Christmas carols, and I was singing a little bit uh, happier than everybody else. You know, I was
You mean
really enjoying.
obnoxious?
I
Obnoxious?
was
Is that
no,
more
it
like it?
wasn't. I wouldn't call it that level of obnoxious. It was. I
Okay.
was singing a little louder. I was enjoying it. So
Yeah.
anyway, sitting at the table with the family and my grandmother, my dad. I was sitting next to me, and out of the blue, he just had a right hand slap across my face. Bam! Just bam. I mean, a slap across. It wasn't a slap. It was more of a hit. And
Mm.
right in front of my grandmother. That's my mom's mom. And it was like, whoa, nothing was said, Jimmy. Nobody
No, so
said
Mark,
anything about
I
that.
mixed that in. I did an amalgamation of that story. I have it. And you being kicked out of the house by the butt. So I
You're right.
combined.
I might have got kicked out on the butt on that one.
Yeah, so the kicking in the butt is that you must have forgot that part. It's in the story, but then we're all hiding under the table. We're so terrified, and that didn't happen. That was I was trying to bring out the essence of the terror of just seeing him hit you. If he's that irrational, well, why wouldn't he get somebody else? He's,
Yeah.
dangerous.
Yeah, I forgot that. Michael, did you read his book?
I did. Yes, actually, I have
Did,
it here somewhere.
did he write that?
I
Yep,
don't know if you remember, Michael, the one where we got underneath the dining room table.
I
That's
do remember that. Yes.
yeah.
Okay, okay,
So
okay. Yeah,
I
Yeah.
added that, but I that's part of what I did in the book because, that's the way I'm trying to create the mood, the aura of how menacing it was, and that was the way I did
Yeah.
that.
I mean, one thing that we've also been interested in this show is like how does experiencing trauma and particularly ongoing trauma, because this is, we had different kinds of trauma, but it would go on throughout our childhood. How the question is, how has it affected our adult lives? Because that's always the question that I get asked is like, why, what, it's in the past, why can't we just leave the past in the past? And so the answer to that is because it can affect us in later life. So I'm curious, Mark, like, how do you feel like that these experiences affected you as an adult at all?
um, yeah. But I don't know exactly how. I'm kind of like my brother. I think it might have made me angry, but I'm like my brother. I'm not violent. You
Yeah.
know, people get worried I'm going to hurt them, but I'm not. I'm just mad. I'm just talking like mad like that. I don't feel like hitting anybody, but um, let's see. Yes,
Well,
it's
Mark, let me add something here. One of the things that made it difficult for me to forgive Dad was in the present day, 20 years ago, God, God rest his soul, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, that time, 15, 30 years ago, when he would talk about you and complain, um, there was no sense that he did anything wrong and that the way he treated us might impact our ability to function in the world. And so,
Yeah.
like, and when you're mad at him, what is it that triggers that anger over in the past when you were, struggling with it? For me, it was my suffering in today and my inability to cope. And if the little fucker would have been a little bit better of a dad, it would have been a hell of a lot easier for me to be successful. That's my old resentment. I don't know what yours was.
Um, it was crazy. I mean, you like you say in your book, we had some fun. We had some because my dad wasn't around and wasn't really watching us, but it's like, my mom just held over us. If you do that, I'll tell your father. It was always that. I'll tell your father. And the father, man, if he got the word, he would, you know, I get the belt. I got the belt a lot, Michael, for being bad to the babysitter. That was a big one that I got. Um,
And you got the belt once. Describe the worst one, the belt one.
oh God, see, um, okay, so that this is a Sex Anonymous story. This is kind of a heavy story. Okay.
Well, if you're
Um,
okay telling it, go for it.
I don't think you told this one, but
No, I didn't.
no,
I
I
didn't.
was say 8 years old, and Kelly was say 5, and she had a friend over. My parents had friends over. It was in Aurora, Colorado. We were in my sister's bedroom. I think Jimmy was in there. I'm not sure, but there was another girl in there. And somehow, this is what I remember, me and whoever the other boy was were running around the room naked. Okay. We were running around naked. And I remember knowing it was wrong, but there wasn't touching. I don't remember any touching. I remember my sister saying, "Take your clothes off." And she was the boss, and we were just doing what she said. My dad came into the room. The door was shut. My dad had guests over. It was at night. And he opened the door and he saw what was going on. And he just went nuts, threw everybody out, put me in my bedroom, and then took the belt off. And he hit me with that belt as hard as he could, to the point where my mom came in and she was putting band-aids on me for about half an hour. I had, welts that turned into scabs, you know.
Right.
And
So, Mark,
wait,
all
wait, wait, wait. No,
right,
no,
go
no.
ahead. Go ahead.
I want to say this. This is something that's always bothered me. It's like my father never talked to me about it. He never said, "Mark, you don't do this because of this. You did this. This is wrong. Don't do this." Nothing was ever said. It just ended with that. My mom putting the band-aids on me, and I never did that again.
Right. So
Yeah,
you think,
but
wait, all right, go ahead, Michael.
I was just gonna say that is exactly why they it- corporal punishment doesn't work because, like what Mark just said, your your dad never talked to you about what it was that you might have been doing wrong there. It was just go straight to violence, right? And that very much I think was the parenting style to some extent of that generation, right? They didn't take the time to explain why something was wrong. They just punished.
Right. And I think
Right.
it's also symbolic of the problem. See, for me, the problem is the world is not safe. Nobody really gives a shit about me. And nobody really wants to take care of me. Okay. They're not trustworthy. All right. So here you screwed up. It's, first of all, it sounds like it was Kelly who might have initiated, but you screw up and
Right.
now I'm going to beat the fuck out of you as a kid. So it's like the world is not a safe place, which is a fundamental problem for an addict. The
Yeah.
world is not safe. Drugs are better. This kind of thing. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, Mark. That
Yeah.
sense. The
And
world is not safe.
Right. And something else I have trouble with the world is that since my dad was an alcoholic and a drug addict while he was being a doctor, at nighttime he would do the belt or just treat you bad, just not listen to you, just be mean and make you cry. And then in the morning he was all this nice guy, like he didn't remember anything. And I would go to bed at night crying, thinking to myself, I'm never talking to that guy again. I swear to God, this time I'm never talking to him again. And then in the morning, he's this nice guy, like nothing ever happened. And it's like,
Yeah.
it just
Right. So
Yeah.
confuses.
Michael, no, so that drives you crazy. And Michael, you had a little of that cognitive dissonance too around your mom with
Yeah.
her health kick stuff.
Yeah, well, like what Mark was talking about, Will, so with the the change, in behavior. It's like, yeah, my mother would like deny me food, would essentially starve me, although I didn't consider it starvation back then, but um because we have very sort of rigid ways of defending the people who hurt us, particularly when those people are are caretakers. So for me, right, I couldn't handle the fact psychologically that my mother, I couldn't wrap my mind around that my mother was actually hurting me. So there had to be something wrong with me. And this is a
Right.
very common thing that happens to children and young adolescents is, yes, they blame themselves. And that begins a lifelong pattern of it is always my fault. And
Oh, for me, let me add to that. Blaming myself is core into my personality. So many times I would blame myself and it's shame, which leads to addiction. And here's the worst part. I turn that into nihilism,
Mhm.
nihilism, which means I don't really care about the world. I don't care at all. Like I'm a really kind of inside, I'm a bad person because if the world is that abusive and that seems to be okay, fuck them, fuck them. And so that's part of that part of me that just says, fuck them. I don't really care what I do to people. And I don't know, Mark, if you seem to be more of you were less of a criminal than I was, I think.
Not right. I just thinking of your the story you told me that one time of like you were living in Ontario and you were so into the fuck 'em, I don't give a fuck that and you were drinking and all that shit. Somebody put a gun to your head and told you, you say another fucking word, and you were probably ready to say fuck you. I don't know, but I remember that
No,
story.
no, he got my attention. As soon as the gun was on my head, he got my attention. I turned into a humble person. But you're right, it's that. And you also, you don't remember this, but you spit on me once. And that was when I was in college, but it was the same cocky asshole who on the outside looks like, hey, I'm happy go lucky. I'm so awesome. And I was at your apartment and you were kind of in a tough part of your life, but you had an apartment, you were doing okay. But I was coming back from UC Santa Barbara talking like this guy, like I talked to that other guy, and I pissed you off similar to that guy. And so my theory is part of being raised with the
Wait, what'd you say? I spit on you?
yeah, you spit on my face. Yeah, for sure.
I
I
don't
remember
remember.
that.
Okay, sorry about that.
It's okay. No, but it's the same idiot, guy that I was giving you is I gave that other guy.
Right.
And part of that is I had a dad who would beat the fuck out of you or not give you any direction in that area and make my self-esteem like shit, but also have a big ego about being a superhero dude. And I call that, egomaniac with an inferiority complex. And that is a big issue for alcoholics like me.
Really.
Yeah.
Um, Mike, you should have seen my dad. Mike, you see Arnold Schwarzenegger? My dad wasn't too short of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and his whole freaking life, he was built
Oh,
like a It's like it started for he was a butterfly swimmer. And you know he swam around Alcatraz, Michael?
I did not know that. No, he
My
swam
dad,
around Alcatraz.
when he was in college, he was in Berkeley. That's where he grew up. And when he went to Cal, his friends bet him $40 he couldn't swim to Alcatraz. So he bet him $40. He swam to Alcatraz. The horns started blowing. They said, "Don't touch, don't." It was a prison. He had to swim around. Took him an extra hour to get back in, but he got back in. He got his money. They wrote it up in the newspaper. I've seen the article.
Right. And
Wow.
Mark, we all have that mentality. Kelly wants to pretend her life was great. Not so much that I'm great, but I'm great. Things are wonderful. Wow. It's like I got the world by the balls. And then the other mentality is I suck. I'm the worst person in the world. Why aren't I as successful as my dad, who's a doctor? And this personality that goes from one extreme to another.
Yeah, I definitely fall into the latter category. Like, I mean, I've been thinking about that, lately a lot. How, you know, like, cause like, my father basically, certainly there was he didn't leave anything financially. I mean, I think that, maybe he would have,
Excuse me. Your
yeah,
mom put it all in the suitcase. No,
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, yeah, that's right. Who knows? Who knows what
No,
happened to him?
Michael,
But
you say he gave it all to his wife and didn't set any aside for you. Right. That's
yeah,
what, yeah.
yeah, which, I mean, that's my own issue. I have to deal with that. But also, going back to you guys, I do you feel like, because this is something that interests me, also being an only child and having experienced trauma as an only child. Do you feel like it has created any kind of bond for you two, both when you were younger or more so now?
Uh,
Yeah.
Mo- yeah, go ahead.
Um, because we snuck around. We sneak around together. We didn't tell my dad stuff. It was like we sneak around together.
Right,
We
but
we
no,
do
Mark,
things.
what about the
But
bond that's created by you and I complaining about what an asshole that fucker was?
right, oh, that bond, yeah, we created that bond in later life. In later
Exactly.
life, that
And
was
one of
became
my
was a bond.
problems, Michael, with having a brother and sister, Mark, maybe you remember it differently, but we didn't have the language to ever talk about the trauma. Like when I have trauma now, my wife and I talk about it. I write about it. I pray about it. I share with it and people in the program. But all that trauma, I don't remember you mentioning it, Kelly mentioning it, mom mentioning it, dad mentioning it. So I just walked around with the trauma. And at the time, I don't think it added to our bonding. I think it was just like we were all every man for himself. Nobody talked to me about it. I don't know if you ever remember talking to anybody about the trauma.
I feel like being the older brother that I was responsible for you, and I tried to guide you. You might not have. I
Well, you did things like for me, which you taught me how to play football, and you made me hit my peak at sixth grade, where you threw me 1,000 passes in the backyard. Okay, but it was still nothing about like, boy, remember what Dad did last night? Well, we're going
Oh
to
no, yeah, no. We never ever talked about that.
exactly. And Kelly also one time told me, Kelly's our sister. She told me one time that she saw the damage being done to me from witnessing this stuff, and she felt really bad for me. Like she was crying when she at one time she'd mentioned that she saw it. And that's like a little boy watching the violence and just being torn up inside. Kelly saw that one. She mentioned it to me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
I
when
think.
you
Oh,
go
go ahead,
ahead.
Mark.
No, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I mean, that for me is one of the most tragic elements of trauma, because like I always used to believe, right? Had I had a sibling, it would have been somebody that I shared the experience with. But what Jim just shared is that it was very much, and not necessarily intentionally, but it's like because nobody had a language, like Jim said, a language with which to share what you were even feeling. You were, both of you were essentially, even though you're brothers, even though you have this blood connection, you're also isolated in the trauma.
And Mark,
I
I've heard
agree.
you say that when you were in those times when dad kicked you out before you were ready to live on your own,
Yeah,
and how
yeah.
lonely that was. That, like, I'm in college going la 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 la, or at home and Kelly's in the house with all the money from her boyfriends and mom, and you're like this guy, odd man out, all on your own, and nobody
Oh,
got it.
I screwed up in school too, Michael.
Right, but I'm saying, Mark, the idea. Oh, yeah. So, do you think you might have been a better student if Dad was more of a healthy, loving, non-addict,
Oh,
non-violent
I think
person?
that if I was a better student, Dad wouldn't have been such a big dick.
Oh, right. Okay.
So,
But wait a second,
um,
Mark. Mark, that's not completely fair because I was a good student and I still suffered all kinds of trauma.
No, I know, but I remember Dad with me, and just saying, Michael, believe it or not, it shows how cheap school was. But my dad paid for me to go to Newport, live in Newport Beach for a year, and not a really nice place. It wasn't that nice, but it was Newport Beach, and I went to school there for a year. And I remember my grades. I didn't flunk all the classes like he made it sound, but I got a lot of incompletes. And he warned me the first semester. And the second semester, um, he he his favorite thing was that I remember was $5,000. $5,000. And that's all it costs for a whole year of going to school. But he was so mad about losing $5,000. I mean, that's it. I the classes. It's really
yeah,
2,500. And
no,
wait,
I mean, today, yeah, it's much more expensive. Go ahead. Sorry.
right. I was going to say, and the bottom line was, I wanted to be a lawyer. So guess what? He cut me off. So now he doesn't have to pay for any of my school, and I want to be a lawyer. That would have cost him $1 zillion. And he was a doctor. Man, he should have been happy. But I'd lost the respect of my father. I could tell right from then on. He lost respect for me, and it's like that's hard if you lose your respect with the parent.
Right. Exactly.
How, and I know that we're getting short on time here, but I'm curious, Mark, how was your, what kind of relationship did you have with your father later on in the later years of his life? Was there any
Um,
relationship?
Not really, because I've been in Hawaii for like 27 years, and I haven't been back yet because I'm kind of afraid to fly now. And it's like during that time we've been through a lot. He put me out of his will. And I was thinking when this guy dies, my brother's going to get money, my sister's going to get money, and my kids are going to get money, and I'm not going to get nothing. And I said, and it's not that the money that made me mad; it's that it's going to make me look like an idiot. That's what I
Yeah.
thought. And it's like so I wrote him a letter saying, "We're done. I don't want nothing to do with you. Get lost." And my dad put me in his will. I couldn't believe it.
Mark, wait a second. I want to take some credit there. I was negotiating with him and explaining to him the situation with the way Jan left you with an affair and took off to Texas. And that is what helped change his mind. And so he realized that you weren't just a deadbeat dad. That, I don't, you don't remember, we were back and forth, you, me, him, and that was what happened when he put you back into the will. But what, let me say one thing before we go, Michael. Like I said, in my adulthood, one of the biggest triggers for hating his guts, my resentment, was when he would talk about Mark and have absolutely no connection to why he disowned you wherever you fucked up, and no connection about what a shitty ass dad he was. That was bug me. So there's no connection between his failure as a parent and you. I don't want to say it's all his fault where you struggled, but the
Right.
fact that he has no connection really made me hate him.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
That
this is fascinating. I want to thank you so much, Mark, for coming on the show. And I would encourage any listeners to check out Jim's book, Freedom and Dysfunction in an All American Family, which you can get on Amazon. Um, because these great, well, I mean, they're not great stories. They're emotionally gut-wrenching stories, but I mean, it's very well written. So,
Right. Well, wait,
um,
let's add, there's also the freedom part, which we don't have time for, but Mark, we both know we can't talk about, but it shows all the fun we had because we had an affluent father who loved sports and loved adventure. And I included that in the book too.
yeah,
right.
and yeah, and it is, and I'm glad that you did mention that because the human relationships are complicated, and I don't want to let parents or people who cause trauma because of their own issues off the hook, but they had their own issues too.
Right.
You know,
And it's not only the trauma sears itself into the brain, but most of the time my dad was actually pretty amazingly normal. A lot of the time he
yeah,
wasn't, he really was a doctor. How did he be a doctor? Because he's pretty nerd. He actually knows what's wrong with you. He figures it out. He's good with you. He talks reasonable. I mean, he's been perfect to my wife, like 100% perfect the whole time. So I can't talk bad about him in front of my wife because she just loves him too much. So it's like, oh my God, he's mostly good, but the trauma was like, wow, that was the tough part.
anything you want to add, Mark, before we go?
Yeah. It was nice meeting you, and I enjoy your stories and your show. I just hope you get the YouTube thing figured out so I could put it on the playlist like I got the other ones.
No, we're
Yes,
gonna we're gonna get that figured out, and we'll be back for season two.
we will. We're gonna do this some more. Well, thank you so much, Mark.
Wait.
Thank you for
Oh,
coming. Yeah.
sorry, Mike. I wanted to mention one other thing. Um, Congratulations on selling 40,000 books, man. That's amazing. I asked Jimmy, how many books did he sell? And he goes, 40,000. I said, whoa, that's pretty damn good.
I thought it
Anyway,
was 50,000, Michael.
Well, either way, I mean, it's thank you. It's unfortunately like the publishing industry of the big five publishers. It's like if you don't sell a million copies, they don't care. But
yeah,
it's true that back in the day, selling 40 or 50,000 was very respectable. Um, you know,
it's it still
publishing.
is. It
And
still
Michael,
is. And good
part of
job.
the I think part of the low self-esteem that came from that abusive childhood and neglectful was that it's hard to even you're like a best-selling author, and when I hear you talk about it, you're like, oh well, yeah, you know. And so it's like
It's
Yeah,
true.
that's great.
yeah, low
Yeah.
It's
self-esteem,
great.
even though he's a best-selling author. What? Come on. If that doesn't
Yeah,
make you feel good, what will? I don't know. No.
No,
right
you're
on.
you're right, and that's something that actually I'm glad you brought that up because that's something I want to talk about in we'll do an episode on that in season two. Yeah, like how that was like a dream, right? And then it's like something else I just kind of put up on the shelf, like and then there's something else that I want, and something
And you're
else that I
still
want.
not as good as your dad. You're not a CEO, dude. So get a life.
Yeah,
And I'm not a doctor, so I'm a loser too. I'm not all American swimmer. So never will I be good enough. It's deep inside my soul. It's not in my head that much. It's in my
yeah.
soul. So, anyways, all right, you want to finish up? Say,
Yeah. So thank you again, Mark, and thank you, Jim. And thank you for joining us on Rising Above Trauma, Addiction, and Culture in a Crazy World for our 7th episode, which closes out season 1. So we will be back with season 2. I'm not quite sure when. It's a little bit like Netflix. You never know when season 2 is coming. And a reminder again that Freedom and Dysfunction in an All-American Family is available on Amazon. That's Jim's book. And we do believe that the worst effects of trauma and addiction can be overcome, and recovery starts with a simple, honest conversation. Take care, everybody.
Yeah, bye. Thank you.
See you later.